hey, we're with David. David is running from Absalom. Absalom has taken over the throne. David's got his family and a handful of people that have stayed with him. Lots of people have betrayed him. It's not going well, but he knows it's going to go well. And so he's crying out to God. And he says to God, hear my cry. And then he kind of rhetorically is talking to his enemies, to God. We talked about all the processing of this. And he says, how long are you going to turn my glory into shame? How long will you love vanity and seek after leasing deception? But know the Lord has set apart him that is godly for himself. The Lord will hear when I call unto him. Stand in awe and sin not. Commune with your own heart upon your bed and be still. Selah. Now, if you haven't heard our conversation the last couple of days about that verse, I hope that you will. I hope that you'll dive into it. I also wrote a blog post about this, and I did an email to the church family about it as well. Offer the sacrifices of righteousness and put your trust in the Lord. So now we pick up in verse 6, 7, and 8. Let's read all three of them together. There be many that say, who will show us any good? Lord, lift thou up the light of thy countenance upon us. Thou hast put gladness in my heart, more than in the time that their corn and their wine increased. I will both lay me down in peace and sleep, for thou, Lord, only makest me dwell in safety. Now, I got to tell you, I can't wait to get to verses 7 and 8, but we got to work our way there, all right? And we're slow walking through the Psalms. That's what we're doing right now on Enough for Today. And soon enough, we will we'll be done with Psalms. I don't know if it'll take us another year or two, but we'll just keep pressing into it. And I hope you'll join me for the journey. I just love this book, and I'm teaching other books at church in different times. So this is my time of the day to get into the longest book of the Bible. But look at where he says in verse 6, there be many that say, who will show us any good? Now, honestly, I could spend the rest of our time on just this one phrase. The localized sense of it, probably the immediate sense of it, was that there were some in David's group, in the people that fled with him, in his household, that had a sense of despair and hopelessness. They were probably realizing that there was hardly anybody on their side, okay? That the power, okay, the economy, the military, the political powers that would have normally defended them had joined Absalom. And so there was this sense of, who's going to help us, okay? Who's going to show us any kind of favor, any kind of good? Who's going to stand for us? Who's going to step into this? And they would have felt literally abandoned. Have you ever felt abandoned? I mean, just where you're like, who is going to help us? I haven't been there very often in my life, but I would say a couple of probably pretty intense times. I think probably the most intense for me was the transition from the West Coast to the East Coast in ministry, and realizing we were stepping away from so many friendships, and in geography, in 3,000 miles from anybody that we really knew. And now I feel silly saying this now, but I mean, we were coming to people that were wonderful, okay? But I didn't know them. I didn't know that. And I only had a little sense of it. So there was this in-between space of, I remember specifically saying to Dana, we need help. Like, we need real bad help in Connecticut at Emmanuel. We need financial help. We as a family, we wouldn't have been able to pay our bills. We need help in the ministry. We can't afford any staff. We need help in construction, renovation, restoration, all kinds of stuff. We need help in seeing the ministry revitalized. And I remember saying to Dana, nobody that we know is going to help us. No one's going to want to move 3,000 miles to New England. No one. I mean, like, I've heard of teams, Paul traveled with teams. I've heard of church planting teams. And I had, in that zone of life, I had great envy for the fact that we were alone. Now, looking back on it, I see, and I'll come to this, I see some remarkable outcomes to that time of loneliness, of feeling, not really being, but feeling alone, feeling like we were a bit without help or without hope. Like, who's going to help us? Who's going to come help us? Now, God had incredible things in mind to answer that question, just like he has for David. But let's just stop and muse on this idea for a minute. Have you ever said, who's going to help me? I've got nobody to help me. If so, then I would propose to you that that's a very good place to be. I know you're thinking, what are you, losing your mind, Cary? Nobody wants to be here. And nobody wanted to be where David was either. But David knows where to go. He knows that God's going to be his help. I'm studying presently, we're studying 1 Thessalonians. And we've talked a lot about the story of Paul between Thessalonica to Athens to Corinth and his lonely journey there. And that his lowest moment, he calls it fear, trembling, weakness, distress. He says we couldn't forbear. His loneliest low was when he got to Corinth, out of money, out of energy, no friends. His loneliest moment. Now, here's what Paul couldn't see that he didn't see until later, okay? Number one, the church at Thessalonica that he so desperately wanted to return to was doing fine. Number two, his friends were on their way, okay? They hadn't gotten there yet, and he didn't know where they were, but they were on their way, unbeknownst to him, okay? With money, with encouragement, with companionship, okay? And thirdly, while he's in Corinth, the first thing he does is gets a job making tents with a couple named Aquila and Priscilla. He barely knows them, ends up living with them, being paid by them, being taken care of by them, leads them to Christ. They become some of his most close and strategic partners and friends in the rest of his ministry, okay? God uses Aquila and Priscilla in amazing, miraculous, marvelous ways. Where was that relationship begun? At a time in Paul's life when he had no one. And he would have been asking, who's going to help us? Who is going to step in? We need help, I need help, but there's no one to help. God always knows how he's going to provide your help. He always is the source of your help, but he's always doing something you can't see when you feel helpless or hopeless or alone. You aren't, okay? And this is why David says, there's people around me, there are many, who are saying, who's going to show us good? So David says, Lord, we need you. We need you to lift up the light of your countenance. God, we need you to see us. We need to get a sense that your face is shining on us, that you are looking towards us with favor, that you are smiling on us, rejoicing over us. He's declared all these things. The Lord has set apart those that are godly. The Lord will hear me. Put your trust in the Lord. But now he's asking, God, please make this real. Please show us your face. We want your favor. We need your intervention. He believed it would happen, but he's praying that it will, and he's anticipating that it will. And he wants to assure those that are with him that it will. Who's going to help us? Who's going to show us any good? Now, before I wrap up today, I just want to throw this out. Isn't this really the question of the heart of every human being? Who's going to help me? And we come up with the answer basically of no one but me. You know, no one's looking. You got to look out for number one. You know, you got to get yourself ahead, even if you have to step on other. Doesn't matter who you have to steamroll over. You look out for you. No one else is going to look out for you. You look out for you. But my friend, that is the cry of our hearts. Who will help us? Who will show us good? And the truth is, the God of all creation, the one who saves us, the one who wants to be our Redeemer if you haven't trusted him, the one who wants to come into your life, he wants to be your home and your hope and your forever help. And he wants you to be at a place in life where you'll never have to wonder who's going to help you, who's going to be your help. So my friend, trust him today. Rejoice in the fact that even when you're wondering, who's going to help us? God will. Hey, remind me tomorrow to tell you the story about how God showed up to help us on the East Coast. I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great Thursday.